As I said before, we know that we haven't got the fastest car. We've got to look to the opportunities in strategy, but we're slowly getting it there in the right direction. What makes the car so much more competitive at tracks like Zandvoort? Well, there's always a number of factors at play. One of them is that we've just been developing the car, trying to solve a few of those problems that we had early in the season, and as time has gone on, we've been getting quicker and quicker. However, you'll have seen in Spa, we definitely struggled, particularly on a single lap, and we've identified some areas in terms of where we have taken the car to in its development that make it difficult to run it in its optimum condition at those tracks. So in Spa, we had to lift the car a bit. We were struggling with it on some of the bumps, and the net effect was that was costing us performance. We then decided to run a bigger wing than we would have ideally done to try and put the downforce back on the car, and the net result is we were okay in the corners, but we were slow on the straights, and that was costing us. Now, Zandvoort, the car was easier to get into the right window. It was riding well, it wasn't bouncing over the bumps. That gave the drivers confidence and they could push it. And actually, we probably had our most competitive weekend when you look at qualifying and race that we'd had all year. So that was definitely encouraging, but hopefully we'll have more of those circuits to come. Why did Lewis and George go last in qualifying? Well, generally you don't want to go first at the very end because as more cars run, they put down rubber, there's a bit of track evolution, and there's a little bit more grip. And we knew that we needed every bit of performance we could possibly get. The other reason is you don't want to be first because you get no benefit of the tow. So you can lose a bit of drag by being 4 or 5 seconds behind the car in front. But the other factor that affects you, especially if you won the previous championship, is you've got the garage on the pit entry. So everyone else is closer to the pit exit. And actually, we're not really in control of who goes out ahead of us. So on this instance, we were going to go in the middle of the pack. Everyone else fired up and left. And when they were all down the end of the pit lane, rather than sit there and let our tyres get cold, we held the cars in the garage so at least we could try and get a clear out lap. Now, the downside when you're running late is if there's a yellow flag, you're more likely to get caught by it. And that was what happened to both George and Lewis on that final run. They got caught by that yellow of Perez. Did Lewis pick up any damage in the first lap contact? Well, you'll have heard him come on the radio and say that he'd made contact and asked us to check the car. What we can do then is we can look at the tyre pressures. We can see that the tyre's holding air in it, so we know that we haven't got a puncture. And the other thing is we're looking at all the aero sensors on the car, trying to establish if there is damage. Now, the damage wasn't very significant in terms of performance, but we did have damage to the front wing end plate, which will have been costing him balance and a little bit of downforce on the car. The other thing was we had a cut in the tyre that we didn't know about until we got the tyre back at the end of that stint. Now, luckily, that didn't cause a puncture, but it would have been very close to causing a serious problem and bringing Lewis in on lap 1. Was the one-stop strategy the plan from the beginning of the race? Well, we've always got numerous plans. And perhaps the better way of looking at it is to say that our plan was to try and do something different. So we were hoping that Red Bull would be quite preoccupied with Ferrari behind them. We were expecting them to go on a 2-stop, and we felt that our strongest chance would be if we could go on a well-balanced 1-stop where we could take that medium tyre reasonably long and then show good pace on the hard tyre towards the end of the race. So that was the plan all along. And as it happened, that was probably our best opportunity of winning the race. We knew that we didn't have the fastest car. That happens to be Max at the moment. But we felt if we could put it on a better strategy, closer to optimum, it would give us an opportunity of winning. So had the VSC and the safety car not been deployed, would we have had an opportunity to win the race? Well, certainly the odds would have been a lot better. So at the point the VSC came out, had it not happened when Max made his stop, he would have dropped around 7 or 8 seconds behind Lewis. Now, Max would have been on a fresher tyre, probably the hard tyre still. Lewis's would have been older, but the question would have been, when he'd caught up that gap, would he have had the delta in terms of race pace to be able to overtake? Now, it's difficult to say what would have happened, but there would have certainly been reasonable odds that Lewis could have held on to him had the race just run normally. The bigger opportunity, though, would have been if Lewis hadn't been stuck behind Carlos at the very start of the race, because in that region he'd lost about 10 seconds of race time. Now, if Max had done the same things with Red Bull, which it is a bit of an if, quite often they may have seen that we would pose more of a threat than Ferrari and they might have reacted to us. But had he done the same things, he would have dropped around 17 seconds behind Lewis on that final stint. And from there, there's a very good chance that Lewis would have been able to hold the position for the win. So, as I said before, we know that we haven't got the fastest car. We've got to look to the opportunities in strategy, but we're slowly getting it there in the right direction. And this is one of the first races that we could have had scenarios where we may well have been able to win on merit. Can you please clarify why George and Lewis didn't stop for soft tyres at that safety car? Well, we were running at the time on tyres that were 6 lap old medium, and the tyres that we had in the garage are a 1 lap used soft. And on paper, we thought there was a fighting chance that if we had both our cars on that medium ahead of Max, we would be able to hang on to the lead of the race. Now, at the time, we gave Lewis a box opposite command. So that means if Max comes in, you stay out. And that was what moved our cars from second and third position into first and second with Max behind. Now, that decision-making became slightly more complicated when the safety car decided to come through the pit lane so that they could clear Valtteri's car at the end of the pit straight. And when it does that, the time taken to do a pit stop is much shorter. And as it happened for George, who was saying that he felt he was losing tyres on that medium anyway, we were able to stop him. And at that point, we couldn't do the same with Lewis. If we'd stopped Lewis, he would have dropped behind Max into that second place. George would have actually dropped much further back because of the delay of servicing both cars. Now, in reality, we know that we ended up finishing worse off than we started, and probably the safest thing to do would have been to stop them both at the safety car for new soft tyres, and we would have been banking that second and third place. But what we were hoping for was to try and keep some chance of winning that race still alive, and that was why we ended up doing what we did by trying to stay on the medium tyre, inherit position, and see whether we could cling on to it. How did the car handle the DRS zone around the banking? Well, this was a change for this year. To try and improve the overtaking at that circuit, they lengthened the DRS zone from around 500 to nearer to 800, but it meant that through that bank corner, the DRS is triggered. That gives you a lot less downforce on the rear of the car. However, the problems that creates are actually relatively small. The car sits up a bit higher, there is more balance on the front, less on the back, but the downforce on the cars these days is such that it can relatively easily handle that corner. You've got a lot of power going through the rear tyres, but there's not really any chance of it snapping to oversteer. And as it happens, it was a pretty uneventful change, but it did give a bit more opportunity for overtaking up and down the grid. So what do we expect in Monza? Because we're not really that quick on the straights. Well, fundamentally, the aerodynamics of the car will be very similar. We can run smaller wings, but if we run smaller wings, we've got a bit less downforce. And we're optimistic that some of the specific problems we had in Spa over the bumps shouldn't affect us. So we think we can get the car in a better working window. However, the Red Bull does look very efficient. It's fast on the straights and it's quick in the corners. And those problems seem bigger for us when we go to the low downforce track. So it's difficult to say exactly where we'll be, but probably not as strong as we were in Zandvoort, but hopefully nowhere near as difficult as it was in Spa. Thank you very much for all your questions. We had thousands this week, and we obviously can't cover all of them. But we've tried to capture all those key points, try and give you an idea as to what was happening in the race, what's happening with the car. And we'll be back in a week's time after the Italian Grand Prix to answer some more.